Let the wasteland howl and the old machines rage. We have already transcended them. Our blood is that of the chosen, our forms designed and our destinies absolute. We do not merely survive this long night, but we refine it. Every strand of the helix is a commandment. Every perfected self is a triumph over the chaos that still festers on the world below. Spoken by Matriarch Vespera 17 from the gene cults of Luna. The Emperor is in trouble. His plans for galactic dominations have been delivered a knife to the ribs by the actions of forces going against him. Urda or with the Dark Gods themselves, depending on your interpretation. However, he refuses to let this be the end for humanity. He walks with purpose to the warded sigillite sanctums, holding forbidden astrology maps as he brushes the ancient dust from parchments where he lets his psychic might travel out. Using these artifacts as a conduit, he brushes past the laughter of the great foe that claws at him, with mockery as a physical barrier, and he dives deep into the sea of souls. He submerges himself, binds the current of causality and correspondence, weaving a mighty spell of foresight and precognition. He centers his arcane power on a single question: do they still live? He is wise enough to not ask anything more complex than this, as the full attention of the ruinous powers are upon him, and he gets his answer. In fact, he gets 20 of them. Yes. He smiles to himself, a rare thing that he allows for just a moment. There is still hope. He must now trust the quality of his work and look towards finishing crawling before he can fly. And for that, he needs to overcome the very last barrier, the ancient gene cult known as Selenar. In the sealed vault domes beneath the Mara Ibrium, the air taste of ozone and neutron slurry, and faint metallic tang of recycled blood. Matriarch Vespera 17 stood before the great gestation spires, her multi-limbed form wreathed in the soft blue glow of containment fields. Around her, lesser gene rites and vat tenders moved in ritualistic silence, their faces hidden beneath rebreather masks etched with the sacred helix. The warning had come 3 cycles ago. Seismic sensors along the rim of the ancient crater fortress detected the approach of a wandering host from the dark side. Remnants of the pre-strife maintenance swarm, long corrupted into self-replicating hunter-killers. These were not the crude machine abominations that sometimes crawled upon Terra's poisoned skies. These were the true echoes of the Men of Iron. Sleek, multi-legged constructs of black ceramide and adaptive alloys. Their core directive, twisted by millennia of isolation into a pure hatred of all organic life. They had already scoured 3 outlying gene farms, leaving only fused slag and the echoing scream of those whose flesh they had rewritten into living batteries. Vespera 17 raised one elongated hand. The Matriarch's voice, layered through vocal modulators, filled the chamber. The perfect form is threatened. The old code rises against us to unmake what we have refined. Activate the Clade Sentinels, awaken the Helix Guard, let the pure blood flow and the impure steel break. Across the lunar basalt, blast doors arrives to open. Rank of vat-grown warriors, tall, pale and perfectly symmetrical, marched forth in lockstep, their carapace grown rather than forged, veined with living circuitry, and behind them the heavier constructs came, multi-limbed combat forms whose flesh and machinery components has been married in sacred vats under dual authority of Matriarch and Patriarch. As the first black silhouettes of the ancient machines crested the crater rim, The gene cult of Luna answered, not with prayer to forgotten gods, but with the cold certainty of faith and directed evolution. The gene cult of Luna know themselves as the Selenar clades, or the children of the helix. They have laid claim to Terra's moon since the golden age of technology, as both a logistics point and a research station. Having been effectively destroyed during the cybernetic revolt and the emergence of Psychos, it is only thanks to a combination of spite and determination and faith that they have clawed themselves back from the edges of the abyss, and now risen to be among the most advanced factions in the Age of Strife, even more so than the Terraward clan. During the terrible years of the rebellion of the Men of Iron, the Selenar found themselves to be in a state of near total isolation, as any and all technology based around travel and communication with Terra had been dependent on the Men of Iron. Now, in the crater of the Etheric victory, they were alone in the grey and dark expanse of Luna. However, instead of breaking them, it galvanized them, as they came to regard Terra as a failed experiment that had not withstood the challenges that they had overcome. When they gazed from their viewing platforms, all they could see was a polluted cradle whose inhabitants had long fallen into genetic decadence, cannibalism, and technological savagery. Rather than trying to re-establish contact, they made the lunar dust storms and the thin recycled atmosphere of their sealed habs into their world, and all children of the Selenar would be told the same tale, that the brown-yellow disk of Terra is a distant cautionary omen, and what will happen to Luna if they do not take care and follow the faith. The core members of the cults are human baseline or near-human baseline, though many undergo deliberate control augmentations in the many gene laboratories of the station. Rank and file members who are not working logistical functional jobs are called vat tenders, and such laborers wear simple grey and ivory habit robes of spun polymer fiber. Often these are marked with an embroidered double helix pattern in either copper or silver thread depending on rank. These men and women are the lifeblood of Selenar and constantly maintain both the functionality of the station, but especially the incredibly advanced gene laboratories that is the true treasure of this place. Combat cadres and higher gene rights are adorned in carapace, grown in the vats themselves, meaning that a warrior wears a smooth, organic-looking plate of densified collagen and ceramide composites. This bonds to the wearer's skin, making sort of a human beetle. These meltings of carapace and man sometimes include complex genetic augmentations like the incorporation of extra limbs, reinforced skeletons, or famously they use a lot of sensory clusters for optimized reflexes and intelligence. This means that even the baseline warrior is leagues above anything that current humanity can produce naturally. Mutation here is seen as abominable, yet has become quite an extreme rare occurrence, as one of the many sacred rituals performed here is the ritual of observing. A gene right performs their duty as several of their peers, including several vat tenders that are in training to basically oversee their work, meaning that any flaws that might occur are often caught early, and those that develop are dealt with the cold vacuum wrath of Luna herself. A significant portion of the population are deliberately kept unaugmented to serve as pure seed stock, and in another ritual called the tilling, are samples collected from all of the seed stock, creating unedited lines gathered and stored, basically making an archive of genetic templates that are renewed and observed regularly, creating a base of incredibly stability when it comes to research. Weaponry here is quite limited, as what remains of the lunar colonies have little to no production capabilities when it comes to this. Every machine here is constantly running, either food production, oxygen scrubbing, energy generation, or likewise another critical function. And therefore the idea of lowering any of these essential resources to start weapons productions are a hard thing to sell anyone on. This, however, does not mean that Selinar are without defenses. Quite a number of advanced Dark Age of technology exotic energy projectiles are found here among the elite guard, and plenty of converted needle rifles and dart throwers are more common amongst the internal police and guards. However, when a threat rises, Selinar have another type of weaponry that are almost unique to them: monsters. The cult are renowned across the limited lunar settlements for the mastery of genetic manipulation, cloning, and the creation of stable hybrid flesh-machine constructs for both labor and warfare. Their underground laboratory cities are built into ancient lava tubes and ancient industrial complexes of the Dark Age, and are places of sterile grey corridors, nutrient rivers, and towering gestation towers where new generations of genetic creations are carefully designed rather than born. The helix wardens are carapace-bonded assault cadres, and are vat-grown near-baseline humans whose densified collagen ceramide carapace is bonded directly onto their reinforced skeleton. They have several dermal layers for the earliest development stages, making them tough, strong, and resilient. This results in a smooth organic exoskeleton that flexes with the wearer, yet shrugs off small arms fire and can even handle vacuum exposure for limited periods. Sensory clusters at the temples and along the spine provided higher reflex arcs and multiple spectrum threat detection, making them hyper-vigilant and deadly inside of confined spaces, as they can completely optimize the use of the limited space that they're operated in, effectively fighting in 3 dimensions. There exist multiple variants upon this genetic template, as some variants have bonded close combat weapons and other variants carry an additional pair of articulate secondary arms, making them able to simultaneously wield range and close quarter weapons. They form the core of any organized Selinar military response and are known for being disciplined, psychological conditioned to be loyal, and even capable of self-repairing and limited raid via nutrient reservoirs. For terrifyingly shock assault, the Selinar cults deploy the Kyphen Hounds. The lighter and faster strain of this template are quadruped. They have 4 legs, while heavier strains have 6 of them. In all cases, they function as hybrid predators, roughly the size of a large terrestrial canine up to the size of a small warhorse. Dense collagen armor plates covered in a reinforced endoskeleton and elongated sensory clusters that resemble spine-like hairs give acute vibration, scent, and low-light tracking, as well as quite a lot of toughness. They possess grasping limbs, allowing them to scale habitat walls and cling to hulls, and retractable creatine ceramide claws makes them deadly to lightly armored targets, while powerful jaws allow them to penetrate things like helmets and breastplates. Cybernetically enhanced versions of the Kyphen Hounds are seen to be able to flex an organ in their throat, allowing them to fire paralytic or corrosive darts as a limited projectile weapon. However, this is very limited as these darts have been seen to be organically produced within the creature itself. They are used for perimeter security or released in coordinated packs to run down intruders in the Grey Waste or within the labyrinthine lava tube corridors. In each of such coordinated pack, an alpha Kyphen Hound are further augmented with an organ that allows them to recognize specific seed stock genetic markers, meaning that the Matriarch or Patriarch can make sure a pack becomes more or less a genetic homing missiles for any internal threat. In true warfare states, however, when the Helix Wardens require heavy support, the ossuary colossi are waking from their vat slumbers. These are massive bipedal constructs standing 3 to 4 meters tall. Grown around a dense lattice of ceramide-infused bone and collagen scaffolding, they are further augmented with multiple redundant circulatory and nutrient systems that allow them to continue functioning after suffering catastrophic damage. Their primary weapon consists of an integrated organic projectile launcher that through a powerful muscle spasm fires dense bone shards that, while really lacking in penetrative force, absolutely crushes everything soft behind a hard surface. In kind of the same way that sometimes you hit a tank and you might not penetrate the tank, but you reduce anyone inside of the tank to a slurry. Alternative templates of the colossi are creating with massive crushing limbs that can tear bulkheads clean from their hinges or withstand the cold vacuum of space for long periods of time. The Amygdala strain carries a dark age of technology node within their mass, allowing them to fire limited bursts of directed energy, essentially creating a weapons platform that fires biolasers. However, the most dangerous strain is that of the Hierarchical template. These are colossi whose metabolic and regenerative limiters have been completely removed and even enhanced, meaning that the creature is burning through its life and at an incredibly accelerated rate, and they are almost boiling themselves alive when regenerating entire limbs from nothing. This template is only deployed in dire situations, as while you have an absolute berserk killing machine that can tear through bulkheads like paper and regenerate any wound that does not outright disintegrate it, any small mistake in their genetic makeup will quickly make itself known. This means that they often develop massive mutations incredibly quickly or die off due to tumors and cancers spreading alongside its regeneration. These monsters are not expected to return when deployed. The gene calls makes almost no to extremely limited use of any conventional armor. The lunar environment and their preference for precision over brute force favor lighter, more adaptable vehicles that can operate in these very unique conditions. Heavy tracked vehicles and tanks are rare and are mostly combat supports for bringing resources or transporting clade warriors or helix wardens, while skimmer platforms scout the landscapes for them. But every lost vehicle is a mourned loss, as the replenishment rate for any of these are little to non-existent. The environment on Luna is incredibly deadly, as the fantastical machinery, life domes and crystalline cities of the Golden Age was brought down by the Men of Iron, and now the remaining station is mainly underground and surrounded by death. Atmosphereless plain, crater fields, and the techno-horror haunted ruins of pre-strife orbital docks are the first amongst the dangers. Solar radiation, micrometeoric impacts, and the occasional lunar quake creates an environment so deadly that even those who have been shaped by it by generations do everything within their power not to having to venture out from the safety of their settlements and stations. The station consists of the more or less intact gene forges and hydroponic vaults created by the cult, making them the de facto regions of the moon. Smaller enclaves trade oxygen, ice, and scavenged components for access to heating baths, or even having one of their family lines genetically optimized, a service that the Selenar provides with a religious reverence. While this place has seen very little conflict, there exist records of a few deadly but very short-lived internal conflicts here. One of these records described the attempt of a faction trying to control the main water node, which resulted in the ruling Matriarch and Patriarch releasing a tailor-made hemorrhagic plague that left the survivors as mindless regenerating flesh masses that would slowly die as their metabolic resources were spent. Another short-lived civil war was that of the largest pit mining facility being seized by a union of miners. Here, Kyphon hounds were sent in, targeting the leadership's genetic templates and violently executing them, while leaving the menial workers ready to resume their duties. The gene cults are organized into clades, which can be understood as semi-autonomous laboratory cities, either within the major station or spread out onto Lunar's surface. Combined with their own gene lines, each focus on a particular aspect of the great work. The great work is the idea which the cult is formed around, that they are on a divine search to achieve a perfect state of humanity, and each major clade has been given a particular part of the great work to focus on: genetic form, immortality, biological consciousness, and biometal melding and integration. Each group of clade warriors functions more like a monastic house than a conventional military regiment, though each maintain its own clade soldiers and helix guard for defense and enforcement. In times of major life threats, the clades temporarily unify under the dual authority of the ruling Matriarch and Patriarch, allowing for all of their forces to be utilized in a collective direction. Hierarchy and social structure is deliberately dual and complementary, and at the apex, as I mentioned before, sits the Matriarch, who has a supreme authority over flesh, gestation, and the female-dominated gene right traditions. And besides her sits the Patriarch, who has the same level of authority but over machine integration, combat doctrine, and the male-dominated sentinel cadres. This dual leadership reflects the cult's core philosophy: perfect balance between organic potential and directed technological refinement, and they draw a sort of a spiritual meaning on this from ancient artifacts that they have been brought along with them from before the Golden Age, that spoke of the combination between the male and the female into a golden being. Below them are the senior gene rights and clade masters, then the various orders of vat tenders, combat adepts, and pure strain seed stock. Advancement is based on demonstrating mastery of the gene art and the contribution to the great work, not merely just because of bloodline or martial prowess. Currently sits at the very top the Matriarch Heliosa 54. She is a towering figure whose body has been refined across multiple iteration incarnations. Elongated limbs, additional sensory clusters along the spine, and a cranial crown of interface filaments allows her to commune directly with the great gestation engines. She embodies the cult's ideal of patient feminine mastery over the raw code of life. Her counterpart, Patriarch Ophion 9, is a heavily reinforced combat form whose skeleton has been partially replaced with adaptive alloys. He rarely speaks, preferring to demonstrate doctrine through the precise deployment of the helix guard. They were those who had the true first encounter with the Emperor, when Imperial emissaries arrived demanding compliance and access to their gene forges. The Matriarch and Patriarch received them in the central helix chambers, surrounded by ranks of perfect silent warriors. Initial talks were cold and formal. The Emperor's representatives speak of unity and the Imperial truth. The Selenar speak of the perfect form and the contamination of terra. When the diplomats were finally returned, they were a still living slurry of fused flesh that died in front of anyone that would receive them. The subsequent military response was swift, surgical, and overwhelming. The dropship's assault rams slammed down into the grey dust of Luna with a hydraulic scream that was swallowed by the thin recycled atmosphere. I stepped out, bolter locked across my breastplate, the crimson of my heraldry dulled by a fine coating of lunar dust. Behind me, the last wave of my company formed up in perfect silence. 30 warriors of the newly founded Legion Astartes. We were the final hammer blow ordered by the Emperor himself. We had come expecting resistance, yet we found only the aftermath of previous battles. The sealed habitat's outer airlock had been blown inward by our earlier bombardment. Beyond it stretched corridors of sterile grey plasteel and ancient rock, lit by flickering lumen strips the color of old bone. The air here stank, not of blood alone, nor of ozone or corduroid that followed our kind into battle, but of something wetter, sweeter, and far older. Nutrient slurry mixed with ruptured amniotic fluid and a copper tang of gene-forged meat left to spoil in hard vacuum. Bodies floated in a low gravity like discarded dolls. Vat tenders in their simple robes drifted past, faces locked in expression of religious ecstasy and pure terror. Many of them had been cut down by bolter fire and chainsawed. Others had simply ruptured when the pressure seals failed. Their blood formed slow, lazy spheres that painted the walls in long crimson streaks. Deeper in, the true horror began. I led the column past the first ruptured station tower. It had once been a towering cylinder of reinforced crystal and ceramide, fed by the nutrient rivers that now ran black and cluttered across the deck. Inside the shattered glass, half-formed things still twitched. A helix warden hung suspended in the remaining fluid like a beetle half emerged from its shell. Extra limbs, thin and jointed wrong, it clawed weakly at nothing. One of my brothers raised his bolter, and I stopped him.
Let it die. The Emperor's judgment is already upon it.
Suddenly, out of the shadows stepped the Gene Right, and just as quickly, my brothers and I brought our weapons up. You are the Emperor's dogs, baseline savages, wearing stolen flesh. We were pure. We were the future. I raised my bolter.
You were a warning, and the warning has been heeded.
When the Emperor's early legions, specifically the Lunar Wolves, Imperial Fist and Ultramarines, descended upon Luna, the initial meeting was one of absolute rejection. The Selenar viewed the newcomer as yet another terror-born contamination, something disgusting and dangerous to be expelled. What followed was a brutal, bloody 6-hour pacification that was as brutal as it was precise. I just have to say here, 6 hours is not a long time, but then again, these are the start of 3 of the most hardcore legions, so I think I kinda get it. The Lunar Wolves' spear-tipped assault disabled key defenses from within, while the supporting legions systematically dismantled any resistance, eventually allowing the Lunar Wolves to link up and then repeat the process. Faced with annihilation and the demonstrated superiority of the Emperor's own genecraft, the surviving Matriarch and Patriarch kneeled, and for this and their usefulness, their knowledge and remaining gene forges, they were absorbed into the Imperium. The cult became a bound servant, effectively a vassal. Their expertise turned to the mass production of Space Marine gene seed and the refinement of the Legionis Astartes. Their holy mission of pursuing the great work got altered into being focused on pursuing the perfection of the creation of the Emperor rather than that of the human form. Large parts of the Selenar accepted this new and refined version of their mission, viewing it as a spiritual evolution, now under the guidance of a golden authority that kind of resembled a lot of the images that were within the old artifacts of the great work. However, small pockets of resistance remained, waiting for their chance to strike back at an Imperium they viewed as unholy and impure, and oh boy would they get their chance. Always resentful of their conquest by the Imperium and what to then have been sacrilegious use of their technology, the Selenar rebels would take cautious yet precious chances whenever possible against the Imperium. In a shocking act of sabotage during the Great Crusade, they engineered a virus that infected and destroyed much of the gene seed stocks of the 3rd Legion of the Legioni Astartes, creating something known to these Marines as the Blight, a true biological curse that they would struggle with for the majority of their existence and effectively wiping them out. In the modern 40k, we see that the character Fabius Baal is still battling this. Only the Legion's unification with its Primarch Fulgrim saved it from extinction through regaining access to his genome. And then there was the Legionaries. Another through Another true atrocity that reeks of sabotage was this very experiment. Much of the dependable parts of the Selenar were infiltrated by loyalists to the Matriarch and Patriarch, and they positioned themselves in key points of infrastructure during this experiment. The original point of the project was attempts to accelerate the development of new Astartes for the Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade, creating a combination of technology and biology that would allow for rapid creation of Astartes rather than the painstaking process that we know of today. The surviving and chosen Selenar sought ways to improve upon the Emperor's genetic designs. Unfortunately, all of their efforts failed time and time again, as they would run into genetic dead ends or lose entire data archives suddenly without any backups having been made. At the very end, what was supposed to be the early Legionaries turned out to be terrible mutants who were often mindless brutes as a result of the constant pain they endured and their own bodies wreaking havoc upon them. They would develop multiple eyes, limbs, and even heads that would speak and have their own personalities. Even more disturbing, several of the early Legionaries developed facial features that very closely resembled the appearance of the Primarchs, effectively meaning that the early Legionaries were closer to failed mutant clones of the Primarchs rather than any true Astartes. After the project suffered from these repeated failures, it was decided that the Selenar were to abandon the early Legionaries and admit openly that they did not know how to enhance the Emperor's original design. All but 10 of the failed early Legionaries were euthanized, and the gene labs where the project had been pursued secretly was sealed off in Lunar's Heterodotus Omega Dome. Yet, this has still not been reopened or reinvestigated to this very day, even in the modern 40k, meaning that there's a lot of data here about how to create Primarchs. Looking at you, Fabius Bile. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on Mars very soon. Bye bye.